Please welcome Tosh Berman and Thom Andersen.
Art Garfunkel and Paul Simon. I said the same thing before. I like to repeat my jokes. Huh?
I think maybe the other way around.
We do things differently in Los Angeles. First of all, I'm here to discuss this incredible, excellent book with the author, Thom Andersen. And I have read many, many books on the cinema. I consider myself probably probably the number one knowledgeable person about cinema overall. I studied Lumiere Brothers when I was like 10 or 11. I was really into it. There was no dialogue in that movie, so it's very easy for me as a child to study those films. And my first toy was actually a 16 millimeter projector. So I used to watch, I watch all the classics. And anyway, so I read a lot of film books in my life. All of them were terrible. Except Thom's book, Slow Writing. The best book on cinema ever. And I'm not exaggerating. I'm not exaggerating about this. It's an incredible read. He doesn't write over the reader. It's a very you have ability to invite the reader to join your world. And so, what's amazing about Thom is that he's a fascinating person. I would even say an incredible person. I hope you don't mind me saying that in front of you. And with his book, you're sort of seduced into his world and his love and his feelings about the cinema world in its many, many, many forms and styles. And so I read this book, and I read it again after I finished reading it, and I read it twice. And it's just like the best book one of the best books on cinema I've ever read, considering all the other cinema books are terrible. But, so one of the questions I want to first ask you about, as a child, you went to church at one time. And I've heard that you actually went to church with Ronald Reagan. What was that? What was that like?
I guess that's in the book somewhere, huh?
It is.
Yeah, I was thinking about that the other day.
Me too.
Yeah, well, what can I say? Nobody liked him, so. So I think, to me, I guess I knew he was a celebrity, and I knew my parents didn't like him, so I didn't like him.
So a negative feeling about this presence in the church.
Yeah, and also that of what's her name?
Nancy?
Yeah. Is she still alive?
No. Oh. No, she passed away, unfortunately. When I think...
Just some more... I won't comment on what you said, but I'm a great admirer of your press and your books, so thank you.
I don't believe you, but thank you.
I'm really happy that you agreed to, be here with me tonight.
Well,
thanks very much.
Well, Mark Webber, who's the publisher of Visible Press, a great press out of London, I begged him for me to do this. He said no. And I said, well, I live in Los Angeles. Anyway, it was a long conversation. But he gave me this honor to be here.
Yeah.
So I think it'll be okay.
And also I have to say that it was, I've over the years I've come in here a lot and never actually bought any books, but I used to come in and read a little bit from some of the books, and it would like inspire me to go home and write. So
same here. I bought some books here.
I owe a lot to this place, and I used to I think dream of having my book in the window. Although I was hoping it would be my book Los Angeles Plays Itself, which, well, that hasn't worked out yet.
Wait, that's a movie, though.
Yeah, but it's going to be a book also. But that hasn't worked out because I haven't written it. So,
but I read it's coming out in February 2018.
Sometime,
Sometime, okay.
No, anyway, so.
Well, you did write slow writing.
Yeah, well, I never expected this book to happen, actually. So.
When I think of the name Thom Andersen, I always think of Los Angeles. Maybe because of the film, the documentary, but you were not born in Los Angeles, correct?
Right.
So, were you really young when you came upon Los Angeles?
Yeah, 4. I think I just turned 4. Maybe I was 3, but anyway, around then. Yeah.
Do you remember your first when you first came, or what as a child? What were your feelings about Los Angeles when you were living here?
I do. I remember the day it snowed. That was a pretty vivid memory. I think that was in 1950. And I remembered the I remember getting up to see the bomb tests in Nevada, which you could see from here. I mean, you just saw the flash of light. It wasn't intense enough that you had to worry about blinding yourself, but it was actually visible all the way here. And they always had them 5 or 6 a.m. So our parents would get us up so we could see it or watch it on TV. Those are some of my first memories. Yeah.
So destruction and
yeah.
set up. The question I'm asking you, because I'm sort of going through my own experience, I was born and raised in Los Angeles, so I feel very in tune to the city, and visually I have memories of the city, which doesn't exist anymore. And that's one reason why I asked you that question. But the other question is, I have very strong memories of my first movie theater experience, and I was wondering, do you have a similar type of memory of your first movie, going to a movie theater?
It wasn't necessarily the first, but let me see. No, it wasn't the first, but I have a really strong memory of going to see The War of the Worlds, which I guess would have been in 1954, and it was at I think it was called the Pico Theater. It was at the corner of Pico and Westwood Boulevard. And because I was really scared, and I know we sat in the front row, and the theater was a really big theater, and it was packed. And I remember being scared by that movie.
Have you watched it again recently?
Yeah, I've watched it quite a bit, many times. No, it's not. It doesn't seem that scary now. Although, I mean, I think though it's pretty great, and a lot of that it's the iconography, the way the Martians looked in the movie, is kind of the way that all space aliens have looked ever since. When you finally see them with their heads, when they all die, Yeah.
They're sort of dandified figures to me. They always dress well compared to Earthlings.
Well, they have better spaceships for sure. Yeah.
And you went to USC. Was it for film classes, or I know you studied or not studied, but you went to classes with Arthur Knight being the professor or teacher?
Yeah. Yeah, right about that.
And Arthur Knight was a very prominent film historian and
critic. Wrote for the Saturday Review, which was still a kind of big magazine in those days.
And was that your first sort of, I won't say academic, but your first sort of school introduction to like film study, or?
Yeah, it's the first. I mean, I went there to study filmmaking. Yeah, and I've been thinking about that lately too, with all all the scandals about that university, and all of its attempts to try to make people believe it's a good university. But I think the problem then is the same as the problem now, that the students. And when I was there, I really hated them because they wouldn't help the teachers out at all. When they were trying to have a discussion, none of them would ever say anything. They really like this. Well, the cliche of black students who were totally disengaged from what they were studying. And it's probably the same now.
I never heard a student be a pro-teacher like you. Usually the students stay together against the teacher, but you're as a student, you're like pro-teacher, pro.
Well, I wasn't until I got to that school, yeah.
You're like a rebel.
Yeah, right.
And I won't say according to your book, but I got the impression that this is the first time you were introduced to works by artist films or the underground cinema in America at the time.
Yeah, it coincided with my years as it coincided with my years as a student at that school, and although it wasn't. Well, I tell a story of in the book about how Gregory Malkopoulos and Jack Smith were invited to a class there, kind of visiting artist class. And should I tell the?
Sure, please. That's a great story.
It's not that good a story, but anyway. And that was Arthur Knight's class. This was his very popular visiting artist class that everyone attended, because he would have Hollywood filmmakers come and talk about their latest. But on this particular evening, he had Jack Smith and Gregory. And so because I was the only student who had any interest in their work at all, I was invited to join them for dinner before at the Roger Young Auditorium, which is the kind of the school teacher's favorite restaurant, where they would take guests. And so Gregory was kind of an aristocrat, so afterwards he said, that meal was barely edible. And then Jack Smith said, "Are you kidding? That's the best meal I've had in 3 months." You're probably both speaking the truth.
I'm presuming Jack Smith was a very flamboyant figure at that time.
Yeah, he was. I mean, a little scary, the way crazy people can be. Actually, I think more so then than later. At least for me, I found him a little intimidating to talk to. Yeah.
So, so you start going to seeking out theaters that were showing like artist films or underground cinema, an active way at the time, or what got
Yeah, in those days, that was the cinema theater. Really, I think was the only one, which was on Western, just north of Santa Monica Boulevard, and it's still there, although it's not a film theater. Yeah, they were like taken to court for showing Scorpio Rising, I guess in '63, and they were where that was where the Movies Around Midnight began. Originally, it was programmed by John Fless, who actually had a small. I don't know if you remember this. The small film club. Mm-hmm. Kind of this series of screenings of not of experimental films so much as kind of classic films that he had at the Ukrainian Cultural Center over on Melrose, I think, which is still there. So yeah, I was interested in that. Yeah, and I went to Movies Around Midnight a lot. Yeah, where these kind of obscure films had giant audiences, but almost everyone in the audience was hostile to the film. It was kind of people came actually to listen to other people make fun of the movies, mm-hmm. like calling out comments or stuff, or to do so themselves.
Did you start writing about films at a young age, or around when you were a student?
Well, actually, yeah. In my high school paper, I wrote about films, which is rather irresponsible, since I don't think there were a lot of students in my high school who are interested in my opinion of Ivan the Terrible, but or most of what we...
That's shocking. I'm surprised they were not totally into that.
Yeah, that was a kind of... I think I was actually a better writer than later, but anyway. It was kind of a bad experience, though, all in all.
You mentioned this...
high school.
You mentioned this in the book, but it strikes me that when you write, you don't write reviews. It seems like you write to communicate not only with the reader, but also with the filmmaker themselves. Is that true? That you want...
Lately, I sort of tried to do that. Normally, since I'm not a film critic, or a professional film critic, I don't have occasion to write against a film.
Right.
So, and I'm able to, choose what I write about, at least say yes or no if someone asks. And the only exception, the only newspaper review I ever wrote was about The Crying Game.
You gave it a rave review, I remember, because everybody loved that movie.
Yeah.
Everybody raved and loved it, and it was like a masterpiece of the time.
I know, it's weird, huh?
And you're like one of the other...
And I came along and wrecked it, yeah. Mm-hmm. Nothing was heard of that movie ever again after my review.
All it takes is one really good writer to write about something, and it's like it's gone.
Yeah.
It disappears.
It is kind of true, though. It's not like... Considering how universally it was praised when it came out, it seems to me it's not remembered that much now.
A lot of movies are kind of...
Am I wrong? I don't know.
I find a lot of works, like films now, are kind of especially from, when was it made, in the 90s?
Yeah.
I feel a lot of times like the way it's the marketing and how the whole presentation of a film, it's sort of like you see it, and then it goes on, it becomes a DVD, and then it becomes something you put on your shelf, and it becomes sort of like an object that's not that prominent anymore.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think there are a number of kind of prominent independent American movies of the 90s that haven't aged so well. I think probably Sex, Lies, and Videotape is another one, actually.
You love it. No, you don't love it.
I didn't hate it, but I didn't love it either. Yeah.
I saw that film in Japan with English subtitles.
Uh-huh.
No, Japanese subtitles.
Yeah.
It's much better that way.
Uh-huh.
I got a more in-depth, layered meanings from the film. I don't remember it now, though. I totally forgot about it.
Yeah.
But you have a real strong, not a strong film, but you have a really strong sensibility about films, I feel, made like in the 40s to maybe like the late 50s. And there's two types of film geeks that I know. One is who are totally into like sort of the superhero, mass market adventure world within a world like Marvel Comics or DC Comics world. And then there's the other side where people like to see works that reflect on what is, quote unquote, like real life. And it strikes me that you're very much in tune to films that deal with real life, that deals with outside the movie theater or outside your home. And it seems to me that a lot of the films from the 50s had a strong reflection of what was happening in the world outside, perhaps.
Yeah.
I mean, do you feel, can you comment on that?
I think maybe if they were making these so-called superhero films in the early 1950s, I probably would have been interested in them, but they weren't, so I never really had a chance. Well, there's also just people like old Hollywood movies, which I guess I'm one of those also.
You don't strike me as a nostalgic person.
Oh, well. Mm-hmm.
Kind of sentimental. but a lot of the films of the 50s reflect what was happening politically at the time in the world.
Yeah, which is, I think, kind of what makes them interesting, yeah.
Including science fiction films, was sort of commenting on probably the Red Scare of the time.
Yeah, some, for sure. Yeah, I don't know about the War of the Worlds, though, exactly what that meant. But, of course, there were
Martians.
I think, yeah.
Red Planet.
Well, that's another movie,
No, but they're from a red planet.
Oh, yeah. Okay. It's true they didn't come from Venus. Yeah.
But you wrote you wrote a book in French about the red Hollywood tan?
Well, I didn't write it in French. I wrote it in English, and my friend Noel translated into French, and I translated his essay written in French into English, but it was never published.
And the screenwriters and the directors of who are blacklisted, do you feel that they had a huge presence in cinema at the time of the 50s and late 40s?
I'm not sure. I mean, all I was setting out to show was that they, had there was something distinctive about their work when they were working in Hollywood before they were blacklisted. Something distinctive about their work, and well, just that they had some influence upon Hollywood films, which before I wrote was something that was denied. So, and that's what we tried to do in the film we made, Red Hollywood. It was kind of a case study, you might say, a sample of those films, and an attempt to show what was distinctive about them, which is a subject that one could approach in many different ways also. But yeah.
Did you approach it like Los Angeles plays itself? It's like a sort of like.
Yeah. I mean, really thanks to Noel, who was kind of more insistent upon doing kind of complete research. I think we might have looked at as many films to make that movie as I did to make Los Angeles Plays itself. But of course, there are very, very few actually appeared. But we tried to look at every movie by someone who was blacklisted that had any sort of political content, or from the notices it received seemed to have political content, which of course is not everything.
Was it really obvious for an audience?
And then we also read some scripts, which was interesting because there were quite often there were movies that earlier had some content that was completely vanished as the script went through more and more revisions.
And, did the audience pick up on the political implications of when those films were originally released?
I mean, I suppose that might be a controversial question, but my sense is that in fact audiences do, even when they're not aware of it, because when they're not aware of it, that just means that it's part of the general, let's say, ideological consensus of the time. So of course they're not aware of it. And it also means that if the film departs from that, they're also aware of it. Although, I mean, most people don't go around talking about the political meanings of films, but they certainly affect us. And actually, I think. When I was young, I was probably, I think I was, again, this is in the 1950s, influenced by movies, but particularly, of course, television. And it was the blacklist forced a number of writers from writing movies to writing television under pseudonyms. So I think, there were two series that had an effect on me. One was Robin Hood, which was written by Ring Lardner Jr., and the other one was You Were There, which a lot of it was written by Abraham Polanski. So the blacklist actually might have increased the political effectiveness of some of these writers, because they could be a little more explicit in programs like Robin Hood or You Were There, which was about famous events of the past, with Walter Cronkite reporting them.
Yeah. I used to watch Robin Hood.
Yeah.
Richard Green.
Yeah. Did you like it?
I loved it.
Yeah, me too.
I loved it because he stole from the wealthy and he gave it to the poor.
Yeah.
And he was really good with a bow and arrow. Mm-hmm. Never missed his mark.
Yeah, he was a good shot. Yeah.
That was a British show, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Advancing a little bit more, I was
and
really...
it was anti-authority, which I'm sure we both appreciated.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Phil Spector.
Yeah.
Phil Spector. You write a little bit about Phil. That we saw the same documentary on Phil Spector, and you write about it in your book a little bit.
Yeah. The Agony and the Ecstasy of Phil Spector.
And what do you find intriguing about
Phil Spector?
I'm actually a huge Phil Spector fan.
Yeah, I mean, I think me too. I mean, how can you not be? Well. Yeah. Well, at least in his time. Yeah, and I was kind of, I didn't appreciate the way the press treated him when he was on trial, because they made him out to be just this kind of freak, and completely ignored the fact that he was an important contributor to American culture in his time. Yeah.
Have you ever met him?
No, have you?
I have.
Yeah.
I had a great. He's a dangerous man.
Yeah.
I met him. My father was an artist, and my dad made a piece called "You Lost That Loving Feeling," and it was actually a beautiful piece he made that was in tribute to Phil Spector. And Phil Spector heard about this piece, and he came to my dad's studio. And he came in a big black car. It was a driver, Ronnie Spector, and him. And he had like a gold cane, and he was like very like velvet clothing. And he went and he said, I remember he said, because he pulled up in the driveway in my dad's studio, and he went, Berman. You know, I started like, he didn't knock on the door. He started like, Berman. And he started pointing his cane at, you know. And he purchased the work, which it's somewhere in his collection. Wherever it happened to that collection, I don't know. But then the second time I met him was after my father passed away, and he showed up at my father's opening. My father had a show like a year later after he passed away, and he came with a bodyguard, and basically he was going through the crowd there, going to each person and saying. He actually just said, if two people were having a chit chat among each other, he would go up to him and said, "You know something? I could have you beaten up right now." He said, "See the guy behind me? You know, it's like some big guy behind him. I'll just snap my fingers and he'll take care of you." And so he's going around as an opening to each, not everybody, but like particular people. And I met him as a child or as a young teenager. And I had a friend at the time who, a lot of people thought we looked very much alike, and people confused us, you know, physically. And Spector was speaking to my friend, thinking it was me. And then finally my friend said, "I'm not Tosh," which really set him off, as you can imagine. And he told my friend, "Bring Tosh over here." So my friend says, "Phil Spector wants to speak to you." That's all he said to me. I said, "Oh, great, you know, maybe say hello," because I didn't know anything was happening. I didn't pick up any bad vibes or anything. So I went up to him and I said, "Hello." I said, "Hi, Phil." And he went to me. He looked at me and he said, "How do I know it's you?" And I thought, well, this is like a great sort of existential moment with a legend, you know, like Phil Spector. You know, it's like this is. He probably probably said this to the Righteous Brothers, I imagine. Like, you know, how do I know it's you? So then it became very weird and dark conversation, and I sort of removed myself from his orbit in a way. And then I saw him once more, and I saw him again at another opening of my dad's, and he was perfectly fine. But back to he's obviously a very ill man. And why nobody treat him for illness is sort of beyond me. I mean, for sure with his interest in guns and his sort of weird sexuality, it's obviously somebody gets shot. That's not a surprise to anybody. So, and the fact that he's put on trial, and I know you mentioned about allowing people to testify that he did pull guns on at least 5 women. And God, he pulled guns apparently on everybody almost. I mean, you know. So I do agree with you about that aspect of the trial aspect. That he, it wasn't. I don't feel it was really a fair trial.
Yeah.
Yeah, on the other hand, I think he did it. I mean, but still, if we're speaking in a legal sense, I feel he should have,
Yeah. The only point I was making was that the testimony of the women who said that he had previously pulled guns on them shouldn't have been allowed at the trial under California laws of evidence, but the appeals court ruled that it was all right in a very well. You can read it on. You can read the opinion on the internet. It's very tortured in its reasoning, I would say. It's the same judge who gave the defendants in the Rodney King beating trial a change of venue they wanted.
To a better neighborhood, right?
Just somewhere else, yeah. I mean, this judge wasn't responsible for it ending up where it was, just that she agreed to the change of venue motion.
I think it mentions in the book briefly.
But, yeah, it's. I quote what my friend Eric Otto said, that I wouldn't, about Phil Spector. He said, I wouldn't want to have lunch with him, but I'd like to eavesdrop from the next table.
2 tables down.
Yeah.
2 tables down. There's also, I'm sorry, jumping from one subject because this book covers a lot. I'm not going to cover everything, but you write some interesting things about Andy Warhol's early films, and you sort of talk about films that last for hours. Where you talk about like Christian Marclay's The Clock, for instance, that lasts for 24 hours. And what did you find appealing about, like, say, the early Warhol movies like Eat or Kiss or those early films?
Or Sleep, which lasted over 5 hours, which I saw when it premiered in Los Angeles. The others, though, like Eat and those others were short. They were only like 30 minutes, so that's something else. But just one shot. Yeah, I think if I saw those, I wouldn't go see those films today. In fact, when Adam, you'll remember when Film Forum showed Sleep, I was gone after about 15 minutes, right? But at the time, it was different. It just it allowed for a different kind of experience watching a movie. It was. I think it was interesting to watch a movie that was didn't need a spectator. It kind of existed on its own, apart from the response that anyone might have to it. And so I think that was what interested me primarily. But it was it also I'm not quite sure why I watched most of Sleep, but it was it was a kind of pleasurable experience for me at the time, and I'm kind of surprised that more people didn't share that pleasure back then.
You've been listening to the Skylight Books Author Reading Series. Don't forget that you can listen to this and all of our other great podcasts at skylightbooks.com. Thanks again for stopping by, and we hope to see you soon.